What I want to talk about, and it's funny, just listening to comments as I was standing over here talking, you know, the whole history of exercise in pregnancy. As OBGYNs, when I started in practice, we used to tell patients, you know, don't let your heart rate get above 140, you shouldn't exercise, it's not safe for you, it's not safe for the baby. And women were actually told to cut down or reduce their activity levels in pregnancy. And there were concerns that, oh, you'll miscarry, you'll hurt the baby, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to hurt your ligaments. So there was a lot of push not to exercise during pregnancy. And what we found over time is that actually the opposite is true. And I'm going to talk about how every one of you can benefit, and also your babies can benefit from exercise during pregnancy. And what we found now is that AWomen actually recommends a minimum of 30 minutes per day on most days of the week. So that means 5 to 7 days. You should be getting out there. Walking is so easy. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what shape you're in, whether you exercised pre-pregnancy, whether you've gone your whole life and now you're in your 50s and you're worried about menopausal weight gain. Anybody can get out and put a pair of shoes and walk. And it's a great way when you're traveling too. Like I find when, you know, when we're in cities, when we're out in someplace where we really don't know the place very well, walking works great. And I found, and I'm gonna market an app that I love. It's called Runkeeper. Has anybody used Runkeeper? I mean, people, yeah. It's amazing. Like you can go out and you don't know where you are. It'll GPS your road for you. It'll tell you how many miles you've gone. So if you know, okay, I want to go out to and come back to, it'll help you do all that and you don't get lost. That's the best part. Unfortunately, if you're someplace where you don't know, it's easy to get lost. So, you know, the Superwoman, happy Mother's Day to Supermoms everywhere. So we all want to do everything. You know, we want to keep up with our exercise, we want to stay healthy, we want to take care of our baby, we want to do the right thing when we're pregnant. And there are things that we look at, myths versus facts. You know, everybody's heard different things about exercise in pregnancy. Everyone's been told you should do this, you shouldn't do that, and I kind of want to go through all that. So one of the myths was the heart rate below 140. You know, I still get questions asked about that. And back in 1994, AWomen had come out with guidelines saying, you know, you should keep your heart rate below 140. You know, if you go above 140, that's going to stress you, it's going to stress the baby. But now we know, you know, almost 20 years later, that that's not the case. That it's really more the rating of perceived exertion. So if you're huffing and puffing when you're exercising, you're working too hard. If you can carry on a conversation while you're exercising, that's the pace you should be at when you're pregnant. And that's a very simple rule to follow. It's easier than what's my heart rate? Do I wear a heart rate monitor? Where do I keep my heart rate? You know, because people who are well conditioned may very easily get their heart rate up, but then also bring it back down very quickly. So don't worry about heart rates. Worry more about if you're out with a friend running, if you're with the MIT group on Saturday mornings running and you're pregnant. Just make sure you can carry on the conversation. If you can't, slow down, kind of kick back a little bit, get some water, and then you can pick back up again. So another one, abdominal one. This I get asked all the time. You know, is it safe? Can I do sit-ups? What point should I stop doing sit-ups? You know, what can I do? What is appropriate? Well, if you think, how many people have had babies in this room? Okay. Remember all that strength you need to push that baby out? It's all core work. It's all core strength. When we're telling people to push, you're using your abdominal muscles. So what do you do when you're pregnant? You know, we don't want you to be, after 20 weeks, we don't want you to be flat on your back. We don't want to compress the vena cava and the aorta and cause the blood supply to decrease. It's not so much that you're going to hurt the fetus. It's more that you're going to get dizzy and lightheaded. So it's because babies are like, and this is a horrible analogy, but babies are like parasites. They take everything they need and they leave you with whatever. So that's true in pregnant, you know, and that's true with blood circulation. So after 20 weeks, what can you do to strengthen your core? Well, that's the best part. You can do the plank. You know, you're on your elbows, you're not compressing your, you know, blood vessels. You can certainly do plank. Then you go, well, my belly's going to get in the way, you know. And if anybody's done Marie's class, Marie has all these great core exercises that you can do while you're standing. You can do sort of the kickboxing stuff that involves a lot of the obliques and, you know, the rectus without laying down on your back. if you need to, you can be on the exercise balls and you can kind of lean a little bit off of that. That'll take some of the pressure off the blood vessels. So don't feel like, and unfortunately, what we do run into a lot is OBGYNs don't always keep up with that. So you may hear from your doctor, oh, you can't exercise, or you shouldn't exercise, or you should stop running at a certain point, or you shouldn't do core work. But there isn't any data, there isn't any evidence to back that up. And what we're finding more and more actually is that you're going to see more benefits to keeping up your exercise, especially when it comes to labor. Now, there have been some studies that have shown when women exercise through pregnancy, their labors are shorter, easier, their babies are actually bigger. We think that your baby would be smaller, but babies are actually bigger, probably because they're better oxygenated. So the bottom line is don't lay flat on your back, modify your activity, but certainly do core work. Keep up with your core strengthening. There's, I'm amazed, like those kickboxing classes, how much core work you get, and you're never laying down. You walk out of there the next day, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know I had muscles back there like that. If you were a runner before pregnancy, can you continue to run? And both ACOG, which is American College of OBGYNs, and American Academy of Medicine, say you can essentially run. And there was on the news that woman, 36 weeks pregnant, ran a marathon. It is possible to run. Not everybody is going to feel like running throughout pregnancy. You may feel crappy, you may feel like you want to lay down on the couch, but if you feel good and you feel good when you're running, certainly keep running. It's like Forrest Gump, run, Forrest, run. It's fine, and again, people do modify. I have a lot of women who may be around 26, 28 weeks when your ligaments start to loosen, and we'll talk about that too, but that's when it becomes a little bit more uncomfortable, you feel a little bit more of that jarring, and those are the times where you might slow down and start doing some fast walking, maybe carry some hand weights if you're trying to get a good workout in. But again, if you want to run to the hospital, run the labor and delivery, that's okay. Pregnancy can increase your risk of fitness injuries. Now that is something that's true in the sense of relaxin is a hormone that softens the ligaments. It's why people feel like they're those, weeble wobbles. I mean, you notice women who are pregnant, they walk and they have a, classic pregnancy walk. It's the hormones of pregnancy that soften the ligaments. They're, you're loosening those pelvic muscles to try and make room for the baby to come down. So if you're doing a lot of deep squats, lunges, things like that, you may be more at risk for injury. And you may feel more flexible than you've ever felt. You may think, oh my gosh, I can do these yoga poses I've never done before. And that increases your risk then for being injured, because it's not so much that you're that much more flexible, it's just that you have more of the hormone relaxin. So continue to work at the pace that you've worked, even if you find yourself, and I'm not that flexible, I can't touch my nose and get my nose to the floor or whatever, but try to avoid doing those deep movements, the really deep squats or the really deep lunges. You can still do them, but just don't hyperextend. So not every exercise is safe in pregnancy. So what is it? What do you think would not be safe? Bungee jumping, yes. Snow skiing, so if you're out there skiing, if you're biking, now you can do spinning classes, stationary bike. The problem in pregnancy, and we've all seen this, our center of gravity shifts. All of a sudden, most of your weight is up here, and so you tend to lose balance. So if you're trying to do things that involve balance, if you're trying to do high impact, insanity, P90X, modify those. Don't do the movements that are going to throw you off balance. Same thing with things like snow skiing, water skiing, I'm trying to think what else. Cycling, outdoor cycling. So avoid those exercises after the 4th month. Up to the 4th month, it's okay. If you're somebody who enjoys getting out and doing those things, you can still do that. If I exercise too much, I'll hurt the baby. And again, this is my earlier comment. What you want to do and what you'll notice is that if you do exercise, we usually recommend 300 extra calories per day when you're pregnant. That's not a lot. It's literally probably a small snack, a protein shake, maybe a candy bar, but it's not a lot of extra calories. However, when you're exercising, you have to take into account your basal metabolic rate is high. It's higher when you're pregnant, so therefore you're going to want to compensate and eat smaller, more frequent meals. I think a lot of us already do that. And hopefully our dietitian will talk about that too. But The 5 to 6 small meals per day, keeping your blood sugar up. If you're going to exercise, maybe have a little carbohydrate type of snack before you go out and exercise, and then the classic like chocolate milk afterwards. It gets your calcium, it gets your carbs, your protein, all of that post-exercise. And then starting an exercise program during pregnancy. Again, you may be the couch potato, or you may go, oh, I want to do that couch potato 5K, and then you find out you're pregnant. So it's okay. It is perfectly acceptable to start exercising during pregnancy. I wouldn't recommend going out and training for a marathon, but I would certainly say, continue to walk, continue to do yoga. Whether you do prenatal yoga, the only yoga that probably is not recommended is hot yoga, only because your core body temperature really goes up, you sweat quite a bit, and early in the first trimester, we want to avoid really overheating ourselves. So hot yoga would be the only type of yoga that I'd say you need to give up. Maybe go to doing vinyasa or hatha or one of the other types of yoga. And then gradually start. So if you have never done an exercise program and you're pregnant, start out with 10 minutes a day and work your way up. 10 minutes a day in the morning, 10 minutes a day in the evening, and gradually increase your activity. And then what about any problems of spotting or pain? Should I stop exercising? This is one of the most common things that happens. If you have any spotting or bleeding, you're told don't exercise. Well, that's true for the time being. It doesn't mean that the rest of the pregnancy you can't exercise. So if you do have spotting or bleeding, sometimes there's no explanation, there's no cause for it. We tend to have a better blood supply in pregnancy, the cervix is more vascular. So oftentimes if you're straining or if you're lifting or running, those little capillaries will pop open and break and you'll have a little spotting or bleeding. As long as the baby, as long as you confirm that the baby is fine, then once the spotting and bleeding stops, you can go back to exercising. So again, there are certain circumstances in pregnancy where you're going to be told you can't exercise, but those are special circumstances. And then the ultimate goal obviously is to have a healthy baby. And essentially what I wanted to wrap up with is exercise is beneficial no matter what age you are. This is focused on pregnancy, but briefly I was talking to Amy and I said, it doesn't matter. We're finding that exercise lowers your risk for everything from heart disease and bone loss to cancers, breast cancer, colon cancer. Those cancers, your risk is reduced, so it's great. You guys are here, obviously you're into exercise and it's wonderful to see that. And I think that's something that if more people knew, we get asked a lot, the Angelina Jolie thing about having a double mastectomy to prevent breast cancer. Yes, there are obviously cases for that. But if you're trying to do simple things like exercise 4 days a week for at least 30 minutes or more, watch your fruits and vegetable intake, simple stuff. And then in terms of exercise, so how do the babies benefit? What happens to babies? Those babies, when women exercise, there's some studies showing their hearts are actually bigger at birth. They're stronger. They have lower heart rates when they're born. So, and that effect lasts for that first year. So those babies may have lower risks for heart disease later on in life. They're definitely at lower risk for diabetes, and that is a worldwide problem. We're finding that around the world, not just in the United States, but worldwide, diabetes is really affecting so many risk factors, not just the idea of obesity and diabetes, but also diabetes and heart disease, diabetes and kidney disease, diabetes and neuropathies, where you start to have nerve pain, you start to have problems with your feet. People probably have known diabetics that had to have their feet amputated. So it is definitely an issue, and if we can, just by exercising, prevent our kids or the next generation from having that, that's an easy thing to do. And then heart disease, again, lowering their risk for obesity. Even though they are bigger when they're born, it's more of that lean tissue, it's not fatty tissue. On that, I can stop, and hopefully we have a microphone.
Jeff is going to work on the microphone, okay? Just so you guys know, I'm Amy Harrison. I'm with the Runners Clinic here at Ohio Health. We're doing a lot of educational events right here. We're actually going to do another Women's Night in October 8th. So mark that on your calendars. We're going to talk about all kinds of women's stuff again. We covered all in one night. Okay, so plan to come back for that one. Again, it's October 8th. And next, Kurtenbach is going to talk. And she's got a whole wide array of everything, kind of an introduction to lots of stuff.
Hit escape on that first. Oh, I'm sorry. Click on the feed with the mouse. And your name will pop up.
So I'm going to yell, but probably still can't hear me. My name's Anne, and I am in MIT, so I'm one of the runners. I usually help out with 11:15, 11:30 case group. I'm also a physical therapist, and I treat pretty much everything. Orthopedics, I do pre-post surgical, but I have a specialty area of women's health and pelvic floor dysfunction. So I kind of put a bunch of an array of things from at least the physical therapist standpoint as the things that we treat. The other thing is I hate public speaking, so if I seem really nervous, I am. And I don't know how to use technology. So some of the things that I wanted to cover, since Dr. Somani talked about exercise during pregnancy, I was going to talk a little bit about return to exercise after pregnancy. Incontinence is another issue that I will speak briefly on. Dr. Booker is going to go a little bit more in detail on that as well. But from a physical therapy standpoint, that's something that we do exercise with quite a bit. Can you hear me better now?
And then just a little bit about aging and female athletes and things that we've seen. So return to exercise, when can you do that? First thing I have to say is you want to defer to your OBGYN. There's no magic number, can you go back to 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or 6? A lot of that's going to be up to your physician. There's a lot of factors that go into that. How long into your pregnancy that you were exercising is going to make a big difference. And if you stop 2 months into it versus 8 months into it, your fitness level is going to be different than going into that delivery. The type of delivery you have, if it's vaginal versus C-section, will make a difference. If there were any medical complications either during pregnancy, during the delivery, or in postpartum, you're going to have some differences there. If you have stitching versus not stitching, there's going to be a healing process that occurs with that. And also your fitness prior to pregnancy. So if you were not somebody that was working out prior to pregnancy, you started to do a little bit during pregnancy, your fitness level is obviously going to be a little bit different as well. So those are all things that your physician is going to consider before kind of giving that green light to go back into exercise. Some things to think about that are still going on in your body, especially as you're getting back into exercise. Pulse rate is going to stay high. It's high during pregnancy because you've got extra blood flow, your heart rate's changing, there's a lot of different hormonal things that are happening. That will continue to stay high for about 8 to 10 weeks afterwards. So if you're somebody that exercises and really watches your pulse rate or your heart rate, that is something to kind of, you're going to pay attention to because that is going to probably slow you down a little bit if you're not going to, that's where you can use that perceived exertion as well. You just know it's going to be a little bit higher. Respiratory rate's another one. You probably notice that during pregnancy because everything's shoved up and your lungs can't move as much, so you tend to get short of breath a lot easier. And that increases your respiratory rate so you can actually breathe. Those changes, even though you have a baby, are still there. So that takes a little while to come back down as well. So you may find that you're short of breath much easier as you're getting back into exercise if you take off. That ideally should go away for about 6 to 8 weeks. Breastfeeding is another thing that changes the body. For one thing, you've got more weight up front, which is going to make a difference in bra support, your comfort levels when you're running. With breastfeeding also, you need to pay attention to diet and also hydration. You do need extra calories for that breast milk. That's important, so you don't want to drop that weight too quickly. Otherwise, that breast milk is actually going to dry a little bit quicker. Same thing with hydration. So if you're getting back into exercise and you're a heavy sweater, know that you need to be drinking more fluids to make sure that you're keeping that breast milk up. Your estrogen levels will stay low for the most part while you're breastfeeding. That's important for especially vaginal health, bladder health, which can be some issues that women can experience trouble with, especially during the end of pregnancy or even at the beginning of postpartum. And also your elasticity and the integrity of your skin and some of the different tissues are also affected by estrogen. So think about tone. Estrogen really affects that, but especially in the pelvic area, the abdominals, and some of the core areas. Your body is going to need more calcium as well for that breast milk, so that's another thing. We keep talking about that, Dawn, but from a dietitian standpoint, that is another time frame that you're going to really need to be careful that calcium vitamin D mixture. And the last thing, breasts are going to be heavier. So again, that support is going to be more important. The bra side is probably going to be different after you've had a baby. So if you are going to go out to exercise, things to consider would be making sure you have a bra that's going to support you better so you're more comfortable. You may want to either breastfeed or pump before you go out. That will also help with comfort level. And just be aware leaking might be an issue as well. Another thing that you really have to look at when you're getting back into exercise, there is something called diastasis recti, which is very normal during pregnancy. You normally have about a 1 finger length split between your abdominals. With pregnancy, that widens, and it has to so that baby can grow. Where it can become an issue is that if it gets too wide and it doesn't come back together, you're at a higher risk for hernia. So it is normal again during pregnancy for that to occur. Ideally, once you deliver, within 4 to 6 weeks, that should start to come back to its normal size. But you do need to be more cautious, especially doing any sort of abdominal core work, as long as that's still school. So how do you check for this? This would be something a lot of people would want to know. So, and afterwards, if you guys have more questions, I could go through some of this with you, but the main thing is you want to lay down, knees bent. You start with the head flat. You take 2 fingers, and you want to put them basically across the abdominals, and you should feel a little bit of a split in there. It might be a finger, it might be 2 fingers. In some cases, it could be 3 fingers. What you want to pay attention to is as you lift the head up, is that changing? Does it stay 3 fingers? Does it go down to 1 finger? What's happening with that? Ideally, it's at 1 to 1.5. That is, again, that's a normal length. If it's 2, 2.5, 3, you probably want to see a healthcare specialist to help with that. So, incontinence. Again, I kind of put it in with the pregnancy because it is something that can be fairly common after delivery. A lot of things are stretched, a lot of things are pushed. I often think that the baby wants to take something with it when it's coming out, but it can't. But it does rearrange some things. So it is pretty common, especially the first few weeks after delivery, to have a lot of different symptoms, maybe more urgency. Bladder area probably isn't as big because of pregnancy, then it has to readjust to that. But you can also have stress incontinence, which is more of that cough, laugh, sneeze. But certainly urgency or incontinence can be part of that. Women in particular, though, as we age, that can also be a problem. A lot of that has to do with estrogen. I kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. But estrogen plays a huge role in the health of the bladder and also the pelvic floor area, both of which help us support and give good function to the bladder. Dr. Book is going to talk a little more about that too. So just to kind of point out from a physical therapy standpoint, this is the pubic bone up here, this is the bladder, this is the uterus up here, and the rectum back here. All this pink stuff down here, that's muscle. So from a physical therapy standpoint, we are interested in that because it is something we can help with. Kegel exercises are your friend. Hopefully, if you're a lot of people are taught or told about them during pregnancy. A lot of people don't continue to do them afterwards, but it is actually just important to continue to do them afterwards, especially if you're having issues. With the Kegel exercise, it is basically the same group of muscles that you would use to stop the flow of urine or gas. So if you think about them, if you want to tighten up muscles to try to stop either one of those, that's your exercise. One thing we do try to teach is that you do not want to do that while you're in the bathroom. Because when you're squeezing those muscles, you're actually telling your bladder you don't want to go to the bathroom. It's already confused. You don't need to confuse it more. But you can test periodically. So if you can stop the flow of urine, if you can slow it down, you've got the right muscles. And that's what you want to use for your exercises. But do those outside the bathroom. I tell a lot of my clients, do it when you're bored, maybe when you're sitting and there's a commercial on, or in a meeting. If you do them right, nobody knows you're doing it. I've been known to do them waiting in line at the grocery store. So try to lot of times what we'll do is suggest holding it for about 5 to 10 seconds, a minimum of 30 a day if you want to work this strength. Core exercises actually can be very helpful as well. A lot of the muscles of the pelvic floor, the coverings of that is called fascia, intertwines with some of the abdominal musculature. Not the rectus abdominis, which is what you think of when you're doing sit-ups, but it's a group called the transverse, which comes more across. So things like plank exercises are actually very effective. Bridging exercises, working on things like sitting on a wall, working on balance actually can help with that as well. The other thing I focus on is hip musculature. With women in general, but also especially after pregnancy, the lateral hip muscles tend to become weak, which kind of throws your pelvis off. That's a support structure. The stronger those muscles are when you're up, especially walking or running, it's going to help to support your pelvis better. If your pelvis is supported better, your bladder's going to be happier as well. So those are some of the different things when you're getting back into exercises. Those are the areas I like to focus on. Nutrition, just real quick, dietary irritants. So if you're having trouble with urgency, that feeling of I gotta go to the bathroom but I can't get there, or if I have to go, I gotta go now, get out of the way. There are some irritants that you can kind of think about. Caffeine is actually a big one. So if you're going out for a walk or running, there's not going to be a bathroom anywhere near you, you might consider not doing caffeine before you go out to do that run. Artificial sweeteners are a big one as well. And anything that's really acidic can actually set that water off. Aging, and effects on exercise. Probably the biggest thing that happens as we age, and it's unfortunate, it happens pretty much across the board, but women are affected by it a little more than men. But we all lose muscle fiber basically. That cross section, the muscles themselves get smaller, and it gets harder to maintain. So when you're younger, a lot of times you could do that running and get away with just running or walking, you're fine. As you age, you're going to lose some of that muscle mass, so strengthening is going to become a lot more important. So as kind of talked about earlier, making sure that you're doing core exercises is going to be important. Even arm exercises, keeping up that body mass, strengthening is going to be key for them. Other thing is cardiovascular endurance does decrease with time, so your recovery time is going to be a lot more important. So if you're not one that, when you were younger, was really paying attention to that recovery, you're going to need to as you start to get older. So if you're tired constantly, if you're having worse workouts, take a look back and see if you had a recovery day. And if not, it might be time to take one. Another thing that kind of falls in, and both Lisa and Dawn are going to talk about this at length, but the female triads can really happen across the board at any point in time. When you look at increasing exercise, especially endurance exercise, so your ultra walking, your ultra running, things like that are going to cause a lot of times more loss in body weight. If you combine that, I'd say menstrual dysfunction, but basically if you're not menstruating as much, whether that's due to exercise, whether that's due to menopause, perimenopause, whatever that reason might be, if you have that lack of estrogen, then you're going to have a higher risk for osteoporosis and then calcium loss. And again, Lisa's going to cover that a lot more. Over time, if you have high risk for osteoporosis and you also have dysmenorrhea or no, if you're not menstruating, that can actually increase cardiovascular risk as well, which is one of the reasons that's becoming a higher priority with women. And then that's my presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to
I heard applause, that must be my cue to come up here.
I do have some information for you guys, like we're going to ask you for testing and just in general if you're interested.
Okay, thanks. My name is Nikki Book. I'm a urogynecologist at Riverside, and I guess first I'd just like to say I'm really I'm really impressed with the turnout here. I work with Ann in the office frequently, and she said, "Oh yeah, this will be great. I go to these all the time. They get a great turnout." But I'm really surprised with the number of people who've turned out here tonight, so I'd say good job, first of all, just for being interested in one or any of the topics that are being discussed tonight. And I'm going to try and hit on a few things and maybe add a few different points that Ann brought up, but I just wanted to touch base with you about incontinence for female runners. And I guess the goal tonight is mostly just to explain to you different types of incontinence and some basic things that you can do kind of at home as home remedies. Certainly, if you get beyond the home remedies and you're not feeling well, I probably would recommend that you see a specialist to take care of that. But urinary incontinence in general is a pretty common condition. Our reports kind of vary, saying between 10 and 40% of American women probably have urinary incontinence at some point in their life. It's an underreported fact. It's definitely something that people come into my office and frequently they sit down and they're like, I thought I was the only person in the whole world with this problem. I'm like, well, no, I promise if you go home and you start talking to your friends, if you talk to your sisters, your mom, etc., you're going to find other people who are having this exact same thing. And that's probably one of the biggest mission statements for our national society, is just to encourage women to speak to other women about the problem, because it really shouldn't be something a lot of people come in feeling really embarrassed and harboring a lot of fear about it. But for most people, it isn't something that they have any control over, that they've brought upon themselves at all. So from an embarrassment standpoint, I would say it really shouldn't be something you're embarrassed about, because unfortunately it's just part of the body that we've been handed. The simple fact is the female urethra is not very long. It doesn't always keep things in place in the right place. So risks in general for incontinence, parity, so being pregnant, having a baby, as we talked about, certainly having a large baby, having a vaginal delivery are risks for that. Age, increasing age is a risk factor, and obesity is a risk factor as well. But probably the biggest risk factor that I didn't put up here is there probably actually is a very large genetic component to this. We're just kind of starting from a research side to understand the genetics of incontinence, but if you want to be mad if this is occurring for you, it probably runs on chromosome 10. But most of people who have incontinence have some other family member who's probably been down the same path at some point. And it's kind of interesting working, now in the year 2013, and people say, oh no, nobody else in my whole family has had it. But then when they start asking them, mom's like, oh, I just didn't understand anything. I think, generations past, people just didn't talk about it. But as Ann mentioned, there's kind of two major different types of incontinence. One is urge incontinence, and I think basically this picture sums it up. You have the urge to go, and you just knock down anybody in your way to get to the bathroom. Most people with urge incontinence come in just kind of saying, I'm a bathroom mapper, or basically, I know where every single bathroom is in every single store that I go to, and I don't go through Walmart without hitting the one in the front and the back. Urge incontinence people also frequently have what we call just frequency. So they go to the bathroom a lot, maybe they can't sit through a movie without going, they're up in the middle of the night. If you're up more than once to maybe 2 times a night to urinate, that's probably too much. And urge incontinence, I tried to put a picture up here just to explain why it happens, but usually when I'm explaining it to people, I just I think the bladder is kind of an amazing organ. It's just a hollow balloon that's supposed to sit there and fill and fill and fill until you sit down and consciously tell it to squeeze. And when you tell it to squeeze, it's supposed to squeeze everything out and then just lay and be dormant again. And for people with urge incontinence, most often what happens is during that filling process, it just squeezes before it's supposed to. So in terms of things that you can do at home if you're having trouble with both urinary frequency and urge incontinence, the first is going back really to what Ann was talking about with the Kegel exercises. So I'm going to add just my little, it's not as elaborate as Ann's physical therapy description, but again, on the same picture here, pubic bone, urethra, bladder, vagina, uterus, rectum, and tailbone. So I kind of like to think about the main set of pelvic muscles being like a hammock that come off the pubic bone and kind of surround the vagina and surround the rectum like a big sling. And they hold things into place. And the nice thing about those muscles is that we have conscious control over them. You don't really have conscious control over the bladder muscle itself, which is supposed to relax and squeeze. But these muscles we do. And the other nice thing is those two groups of muscles work opposite from each other. So in a normal setting, when you go to the bathroom and you want to urinate, you sit down and the bladder muscle squeezes and the pelvic floor muscles relax to let the urine out. The converse is true as well. When you squeeze the pelvic floor muscles, it forces the bladder muscle to relax. So if you can work on your Kegel exercises, if you get the urge to urinate and you do 2 or 3 Kegel exercises, that should give you an additional 30 to 80 seconds to get to the bathroom. And for a lot of people, that's enough to avoid some embarrassment. And probably one of the, just to add a little more on Anne's, one thing when people come in with the Kegel exercises, most of my patients say, oh yeah, I learned about that in pregnancy, they told me and I stopped doing it, and most commonly people will say they stopped because they just didn't know if they were doing it right. So, one really simple thing you can do, like Anne was saying, you want to be squeezing the muscles that would either stop your urine or your stream of stool. If you're squeezing there, you know you're squeezing the right thing. But there are other muscle groups that people frequently will squeeze instead. So, while you're sitting in a chair, if you kind of put one hand on your lower abdominal muscles, and as long as you're not raising up and down on the chair, meaning that you're squeezing your gluteals, you can't feel the abdominal muscles moving, and your legs aren't going like that, then you have the right muscle group. But most commonly, people will start squeezing their belly and squeezing here, squeezing their legs together. They squeeze their gluteal muscles. So if you can sit in a chair with a hand on your belly and your legs aren't moving and you feel like you're squeezing like you would to try and stop a urine stream, then you're doing the muscle exercises correctly. And then Anne touched base on the bladder irritants, and again, I would just echo, staying away from caffeine, carbonated beverages, and artificial sweeteners is really very helpful. We frequently will get people in who are like, I have to go to the bathroom all the time. And we sit down and look at what they're drinking a case of Mountain Dew a day. So, we can work with both the bladder, and you'll be really happy to cut out like 3,000 extra calories a day too. And then the last very simple thing you can do with urgent incontinence at home is just simply make sure that you're going back to the bathroom frequently enough. So it's actually normal throughout the course of the day to void about every 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours for some people. But frequently we'll have people come in, and most often it's teachers who just say, I just don't have time during the day. I go in the morning and then I hold it for 8 or 9 hours during the day, and then at the end I just can't get to the bathroom in time. And that's, you really don't need any kind of medical treatment for that. You just simply need to get into the bathroom more frequently. So, and that's a hard thing for that busy, I do everything, super mom that Dr. Somani mentioned, but a very simple one. And again, you could be treated until the cows come home with all sorts of different strange things, but if you're not going to the bathroom frequently enough, you're not going to feel better. So then the second major type of urinary incontinence is stress incontinence, and as Anne mentioned, it's just leakage when you cough, laugh, sneeze, run, kickbox, whatever this group may be trying to do. And this is the most common kind of complaint for younger age group that I see is people will come in and say, I really want to get back into X, Y, or Z exercise that I was doing before, but I can't because now I'm leaking urine. So if we go back to kind of the same anatomy picture, and I'm sorry if it's grotesque to some people, we get really used to looking at these anatomy pictures. But basically, for people with stress incontinence, if you think about doing any kind of activity where you increase the amount of pressure that's in your abdomen, just a simple cough will do. When you push down and you have pressure in your abdomen, it pushes down onto the bladder. And in a normal setup, the bladder will kind of flatten at an angle like this, and the urethra tube stays at an angle just like this, and there gets to be almost like a physiologic kink between where urine's being stored and where it would come out. For people with stress incontinence, the most common reason that they have it is just that the urethra tube deviates and it moves back and forth into the vaginal canal, which is a hollow space. So when they cough or sneeze, if the urethra tube swings into the vagina, there gets to be just a roundabout for the urine to sneak around. And I like kind of the analogy people say, if you think about a garden hose, and there's water running through it, it's laying on a firm sidewalk, if you step on it, you're going to stop the flow of water. But if you put it in a sandbox and it's nice and soft and the hose can move and you step on it, the hose will move right under your foot and the water will deviate right around. Same idea with stress incontinence. So again, if you can imagine trying to keep that urethra tube from swinging back and forth, that's where your Kegel exercises come in again. They just basically hold the urethra tube where it's supposed to be. And then one other kind of simple device, and this would require a visit to a physician, but there is a really simple device that we can use called a continence ring, which basically is just a piece of plastic, which once it's fit appropriately, most women are able to take in and out on their own. A lot of people who have problems with incontinence only when they're running, and that's really common, will just put it in when they go in for runs, and they'll take it out the rest of the day. But it's basically just a piece of plastic with a hard knob that sits under the urethra tube so that it can't move back and forth as you're doing your exercises. And then the at-home version of this is a tampon. And it's a great trick, and it's cheap, and it's something you can try at home. I would say most people would try and use a tampon. Again, the idea is you just don't want the urethra tube swinging back and forth. So frequently it'll have to be a little bit larger size tampon, like those little whatever, they're those really little tiny tampons. They're probably not going to work. It probably has to be a larger size tampon so that it doesn't let the urethra tube move around. But it can be a really simple trick. Again, most commonly people use this if they're having incontinence, mostly when they're running, and they can say, I'll just put the tampon in right before I go, and then I'm good to go for the whole rest of the run and take it out at the end. So anyways, those are kind of at-home things to think about and try. Like I said, if you get past those things, then usually, discussion with your physician can help you to modify things further than that. But those simple things really can help, upwards of 60% of people who are having incontinence, so they can be very helpful to us. Thank you.
So I'm Krumlauf. I'm a physical therapist like Ann, except I don't do what she does. That's up to her. But I'm so excited to be here. I am just beside myself because bone health is my passion. And a nurse, Linda Hightower, said, she's done a lot of research on osteoporosis, mostly in older women. She said, osteoporosis is a pediatric disease with geriatric consequences, and she was right. And we'll talk about why that is soon. But I want to make a proposal to this group because everything starts through the grassroots. Can we please stop calling it osteoporosis? And here's why. Because as soon as I say, and this happens with therapists as well, so if I have a therapist who does sports therapy, physical therapy, and I say, let's talk about osteoporosis, they automatically shut off because our perception of osteoporosis always has been, and still is really for the most part, grandma, right? 80-year-olds. And therapists are guilty of it too. And what I want to say is, for Ohio Health and the way that we're building our bone health program is to say we need to be looking at bone health, and not only in women, by the way. The guys are having challenges with low bone mass as well. So we need to be looking at our young girls, young boys, all the way through the lifespan. And yes, once we reach menopause and we lose the estrogen and we lose the testosterone, we do start losing a lot of bone mass. But the goal is really to achieve what we call peak bone mass, which is why Linda Hightower said, it's a geriatric disease, because if our girls and our boys never lay down as much bone as they possibly can, by the time they get really to 20 years old, by the time we reach 20 years old, we've got about 80 or 90% of our bone. That's all we get. And so then there's this leveling off period where we kind of don't lose, but we're not really gaining bone mass necessarily either. I think the research is out on that still, but we'll talk about that. And then certainly once we, as women, start to reach perimenopause, and then it's just really a lot of bad news after that in terms of our bone health. So if we could just start calling it bone health and then start thinking about it as a lifespan issue, I think that would be amazing, and that's my mission, one of my missions. So I just want to backtrack so that I can make sure that we're all on the same page with bone health and osteoporosis. So here's the deal. So we have osteoclasts, we have osteoblasts. Now listen, I'm a physical therapist, I'm not a physiologist, so I'm just gonna really take this down to the bare bones because that's the only way I understand it, so I use Pac-Man. So the osteoblast, when osteoblast activity is greater than osteoclast activity, and this is what's happening in your bones even as you sit here, when osteoblast activity is greater than osteoclast, we're actually building bone. So if we think of these guys as osteoblasts and this one little guy as osteoclast, we've got a lot more blasts right now. This might be a young person, 15 years old. So we're building a lot of bone and we're not eating as much of it away. Once we reach 30, 35, 40, menopause, then the osteoclasts start to outweigh the osteoblasts, and so if these are osteoclasts, we've got a lot more of those. We're eating more bone than we're making. Okay, so some things you can't change in terms of risk factors about bone health: gender. Females are at a higher risk, obviously. Age, as our age increases, and again, we really want to think about it as reaching peak bone mass in addition to not losing it as we get older. Ethnicity, Caucasian and Asian, higher rate of low bone density. Body size and type, small frame. A family history, if your mom or even your dad has fractured a hip, you're at a much higher risk for having bone mass issues. Age at menopause. So here's the deal, estrogen is bone sparing. So we want to have as much time with estrogen floating around in our bloodstream as possible. So if we have a girl, let's say, who doesn't start her period until she's 15 years old and then has maybe a hysterectomy at 40 or 45 years old, she's got 10 or 15 years less time where that estrogen is really floating around in her bloodstream, sparing her bones. So actually, I think and the doctors would say this, I don't know this, but from what I've read, if a girl reaches 15 or 16 and hasn't started menstruating, I think they do something maybe to kind of get that going.
Well, there's two different criteria, 14 with no sexual
okay.
And then the other, just to clarify,
yeah.
It's not about hysterectomy, it's about oophorectomy.
Yeah.
So if you have a hysterectomy where your uterus is removed but your ovaries are left, you still have estrogen production.
Yes.
So you don't have that risk of surgical
Right.
menopause.
That's right. So it's got to be a full. I mean, so when I talk to my patients, they know it as full or partial, or I still have something. So yeah, it has to be full.
It's oophorectomy versus
Right.
hysterectomy and oophorectomy.
Right. Okay. Things you can change: low peak bone mass. So getting enough exercise when you're younger, drinking, getting enough calcium, vitamin D. Don will talk more about that. Your hormonal status, we talked about that. Your body weight. The BMI, the critical cutoff in the research seems to be 16.4 BMI to increase your bone mineral density. Adipose tissue has floating estrogen as well. Medications, whether or not you have to take steroids, the glucocorticoids, anticonvulsants, some of the other medicines to treat cancers. Surgeries, and I think of surgeries typically as not necessarily the surgery itself that causes people to have low bone mass, but the fact that you're maybe non-weight bearing or bedridden after a surgery, depending on the surgery. And then the use of tobacco also is a risk factor you can change. Diet, caffeine increases the diuretic effects. Are we keeping the calcium in our body as long as we need to for effect? Protein if it's excessive. Alcohol, obviously alcohol is a risk factor for a couple of reasons. Number one, it interferes with the osteoblast activity, but also if you're drinking a lot and you fall, you have a higher risk for fracturing something. And then carbonated drinks, and especially in our youngsters, and I believe it's probably twofold. It probably has to do with some of the phosphorus in the carbonated drinks, but I think also it has to do with our youngsters drinking carbonated beverages in place of maybe milk or something else that's fortified with vitamin D and calcium. Stress and depression because of the increased cortisol through the blood, and then high blood pressure. All those are modifiable. All right, so I'm going to skip this because I really want to get to the point of the discussion where we're talking about, Don's going to go over some of this calcium and vitamin D, and here's what I have to say about that when I talk to my patients about it, is that every week or two in my inbox from Medscape, which is a research tool that sends me information about any research that comes out about osteoporosis or bone health or any of those drugs, information, it changes. So a couple weeks ago I got another article that said, okay, no, we were wrong about vitamin D. You really don't need any. In fact, if you take too much, it's harmful. So, you know, I really just say, talk to your nutritionist about it. I take my vitamin D3 every day. I do some calcium. I exercise. I try to do all the right stuff. But in terms of pinning down a number, 600, 800 IUs, 1,000 milligrams of calcium, I just don't know. It's not my specialty. I don't know if it drives Don crazy or not, but that's what I have to say about that. So in the clinic, just quickly, because when we do think about bone health, we do think about really kind of flex, what we would call a forward head and a kyphotic posturing. Quickly with a plumb line, the plumb line should, so if you're standing next to a plumb line, it should bisect the ear. It should go through, just through the shoulder joint, should go through the greater trochanter, which is right about here, a little bit in front of the knee, a little bit in front of the ankle. So I had someone that I worked with once. I stood her next to my plumb line and I said, give me really crappy posture. So you can see how her head is way in front of the plumb line, her shoulders are kind of rounded, her butt is kind of rounded. Plumb line really isn't hitting anything where it's supposed to be. And so then I asked her to stand up straight, and it's better but still not perfect. So standing up straight, her ear, she still has a little bit of what I would call a forward head, which is something I would correct in the clinic actually with some strengthening. And she's got a little bit of a hyperlordosis, which we would also correct by a little bit of core strengthening. So, but that gives you an idea of how to use a plumb line. So if you're interested, you could actually go home, set one up, set your camera up, stand next to the plumb line and just see where you're at with your posture. Or you could come see me and I'd make you feel bad about it. Not really, I wouldn't. So then quickly a few definitions as we start to talk about what the research is saying about exercise. So as physical therapists, we've known forever that exercise is where it's at for us in terms of bone health. No offense, physicians, the drugs are fine, but I would really, if we could just do some things with exercise and proper nutrition, I would be thrilled. So what we're seeing now, high impact loading, so we're talking about jumping, vertical jumping, we're talking about jumping rope, and we're talking about running at a pace that's faster than 10-minute miles. So 10-minute miles or faster. Odd impact loading just means you're doing something different. So think gymnastics, think basketball, think anything that takes you out of just one plane of motion. Odd impact loading. Low impact loading, we think of jogging at a pace that's slower than 10-minute miles. And then combined loading protocols, impact activity, plus high magnitude joint reaction. What we're talking about here is, we used to think bicep curls and shoulder presses was enough to get it done in terms of resistance training for bone health. Not necessarily true. So we want to be doing something else while we're lifting weights. So if we can flip tires, for example, that would be good. So something where you're actually jumping, squatting, and doing a press at the same time. That would be perfect. So when we talk about For example, maybe this group of women who maybe haven't hit menopause yet, so let's say you're premenopausal, anything less than 50-year-olds for the men, and women who are premenopausal. We actually don't use a T-score from the DEXA scan, we actually talk about it in terms of a Z-score. And the Z-score really just matches, when you have a DEXA scan done, it really just matches you up with same age, same gender controls, and then gives you a number to let us know how far away, below or above or right on you are in terms of your bone mass, your bone density. So the triad, the female athlete triad, we think of it as having 3 different parts. So it's energy availability for the sports that you're doing or for the activities that you're doing, on top of what you need just to live, just to breathe. Making sure that we're taking in enough food, enough nutrition, the reproductive health, which we've talked about, and then whether or not you're menstruating, and then the bone mass, of course. So I make this point about 4 times in this slide presentation, so it must have made an impact on me. But we girls accrue and boys accrue 40% of the bone mass you're going to have for your entire life in the 3 years surrounding for girls when we have our first period. So it's an important time for girls to be exercising and eating right. So if you're not having your period, so we talk about amenorrhea, and I think most of the literature that I read for our folks, amenorrhea for more than 3 months, so not having 3 months worth of periods in a row, and eumenorrhea just means that you're having normal menstruation. So if you're not having periods, and that goes on for a year, you're losing 2 to 3% of your bone mass just because you're not having a period. Your nutrition can be fine, you may be exercising, but just because you don't have that estrogen impact. And then increasing your energy availability, make sure you're eating enough, and restoring your menstruation, you can then potentially regain the 2 to 3% in the following year, but there are no guarantees with that.
Are you taking questions during, or should we?
I'll probably wait till after, yeah. So oligomenorrhea and amenorrhea, I think that for the oligo, I think it's cycles lasting longer than 35 days and only having, I think, 4 to 9 periods a year. You have an increase, 2 to 4 time increase in stress fractures. Has anybody had a stress fracture? Yeah, so we see them, and I'll say this about stress fractures. Back in the day when I started practicing about 18 years ago, really, maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, I'd see a youngster with a spine stress fracture. And I think I started counting them this year because it's so persistent, so prevalent. I think I've had almost 10 youngsters this past year thus far who have come in to me with stress fractures. Now, I'm not saying it's bone health, but I'm saying stress fractures is a risk of low bone mass. So it just makes me start to wonder what's happening with our youngsters' bone mass. And the men are not exempt, by the way. So your husbands, your brothers, your sons, we're seeing low bone mass in those guys as well. It's just that it's not as well studied yet. So what does the research say? So the research says that bone tissue responds better to dynamic activities, jumping, running, lunging side to side, versus, so our bodybuilders, not very good bone mass when you compare it to some of the basketball players and gymnasts. And even the Olympic lifters, power lifters, better bone mass because they're doing more dynamic lifts. So the athletes in the high impact and the odd impact sports, better bone mass. Sex hormones obviously play a major role, and so does energy. This is energy availability. Do you have enough, are you eating enough food to support your activities and your bone health and your menstruation? And then the high impact alone impacts only your femoral neck. So the femoral neck, there was a picture earlier, but it's part of the femur up in the hip. And so we're seeing folks still have spine bone loss if all they do is just high impact without any high power resistance training. So here's the thing, everything in moderation. So we looked at a study where they looked at young people who were sub-elite athletes. Maybe they were practicing 3 hours a week, 2 to 3 hours a week total. And then we looked at elite young athletes who were practicing 5 to 6 days a week. And what we found was that the athletes, the sub-elite athletes, had a much higher bone density than the excessive, we'll call them excessive exercisers. Something to keep in mind, especially with our youngsters who are doing club sports 11 months out of the year. And then again, there's that narrow critical window of 3 years when we really have to make sure our kids are laying down as much bone as they can around puberty. So for body fat, if you've ever had has anybody had a bod pod done for body fat? Some? So if you're interested in how much body fat on average you need to maintain your periods, if you're someone that's not regular and you think it might be because of your nutritional status or your lean mass, so to have regular periods, women need 17% body fat. And to maintain menstruation, 22%. So, you know, I don't know, we hear about guys who have 9 and 10% body fat, and that's just how they live. We can't do that as women. I mean, we just need more. So I want to break it down and talk about endurance athletes, runners, and then cyclists, and then swimmers, just briefly. So for the runner's bone mineral density is greater than people that don't do anything, greater than controls. But when we look at long distance runners and we compare the bone mass of those guys to sprinters, gymnasts, basketball players, even volleyball players, because of their jumping, it's less. And then as your mileage goes up each week, as your mileage goes up, we see bone mass fall on average. So you can think about that, I mean, when you're training for runs. And then cyclists, if you think about cycling, it's not weight bearing. So we have to have weight bearing so that we stress the bone. So when you think about cyclists, it's not weight bearing. And one of the studies showed that at the beginning, 82% of elite cyclists had either osteoporosis or penia. That's 8 out of 10 of those cyclists. And then we followed those folks, and then 7 years later, we took their bone mass again, and 31% of those folks who had osteopenia progressed to osteoporosis. So I only say that not to be Chicken Little and tell you the sky's falling, but I just want us to start thinking about swimmers is no weight bearing, right? There's no weight bearing at all, so they don't get any bone mass help from their exercise. Now it's great for the cardio, it's great for the lungs, it's great for body image, but it just doesn't help our bones. So here's my goal tonight is, they did a study of mice and they taught mice how to jump. And then they had a control group of mice who they didn't teach to jump. And so those guys were just laying around eating. And then the mice they taught to jump, they would have some mice jump 5 times, some mice jump 10 times, all the way up to 100 jumps a day. And what we found was the mice who jumped 5 to 10 times had a significantly increased bone mineral density than the mice that did nothing. Well, that makes sense. But then they looked at the mice that jumped 5 to 10 times a day and compared them with the bone mass of mice that jumped 100 times a day, and no better in the 100 jumpers. So all I want to say is just jump a little. You don't have to do 100 jumps. If you play with your kids or your grandkids and you're out chasing them around, kids are amazing and they know what to do because they climb trees and then they jump out of them. They're building bone mass. You can watch your kids and say, oh, my kid is building bone mass. This is amazing. So play with your kids, your grandkids. Jump rope is amazing. But just do something besides your running. That's all I'm trying to say. But if you don't and you need me, you can find me in the clinic and we can work on your posture and your bone mass. And I'll give you a whole program to do that'll involve some jumping. And this is done.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. So the back of my page has my notes from this evening. I'm like, oh, I want to remember that and this and this. So I'll give you some more to remember for your evening. So in working with women and seeing women on a pretty regular basis, some of the common things that I hear, especially from women, is weight. How do I control my weight? What happens when I go through menopause, and why do I gain this weight? And what do I do about it? Why is it so hard then to get it off? So that's what I want to talk to you about. And then also, for women who that's not where you are yet, you are still having regular monthly cycles, but your hormones are up and down that whole month, and you're craving things, and what is going on? How do you fight those urges? What's going on with your body? So we're going to tie those two together. It doesn't seem like they really connect, but they do. So we've talked a lot about estrogen tonight. Multiple people have touched on it, and that's one of the big things that changes during menopause. Your estrogen levels drop. And estrogen is a very protective hormone, and as women, it tells our body where we should store our fat. Which is why when you're having regular monthly cycles, you're not storing fat in the belly area, you're storing it in your hips, in your rear end, because you're gonna need it later. When you have kids, when you're active, that's where you store that fat. It's not affecting any of your organs there, it's sort of in a benign place. After you go through menopause, that estrogen level drops off, and then your hormones are sort of similar in a way to men's, where they don't have as much estrogen, and where do they store fat? So that's where that body fat is coming from. That's why it's in the middle, which is why it's so frustrating. So that's why it's happening. Now the problem with it being there is it's increasing your risk in terms of health. Instead of being here where there's no organs, nothing super significant there in terms of activities, here it's surrounding all your internal organs, your digestive tract, your stomach, sort of significant organs, and it's wreaking havoc in that area. So we want to lose that belly fat, not have that, because it's going to increase your risk for heart disease, increase your blood pressure, different health conditions are going to be more significant, which is why your health, your heart risk increases after you go through menopause. So that's sort of what's going on. So you've gone through menopause, your estrogen has dropped, and you sort of have this slow weight gain. The other question to ask yourself is, how is my activity level? Is my activity level honestly the same now as it was 10 years ago, as it was 20 years ago? Because typically that's another reason for that weight gain, is that as we age, we're not as active. And someone mentioned about muscle mass. As we age, because we're not as active, because we're not strength training, we're losing muscle mass as well. We don't want to lose muscle mass because that is more active. It's burning more calories. If we're losing muscle mass, even if our weight doesn't change, guess what is increasing? Our body fat. So our body distribution is changing. It's kind of depressing, I'm sorry. But I do have hope. So this is just letting you know what is happening to your body as you age, which is why activity is so important. And I commend all of you, because I'm sure most of you are active in some way, to come into a running store and hear talk about this. So being active. And then also in terms of how you're eating. Are you feeling more comfortable with your body and just less intentional about what you're putting in, more relaxed? Or are you still pretty intentional and vigilant? What about if you're trying to lose weight? Well, I'm gonna just eat less. And what that means when I talk to a lot of women is, I will eat less in the morning and during the day, and then when I get home, my body is saying, you have to eat now, and it eats whatever you've put in front of it or whatever it can find. So this is how the two connect then. because I find that most of the women I work with, if they're trying to lose weight, are eating less during the day, and then their body physiologically kicks on when they get home, and that hunger kicks in and you can't do anything to stop it. You don't have that control. So I want to give you that control to help you in terms of weight management, to help you in terms of the cravings and the hormonal fluctuations during your monthly cycles. So one way to have that control is to give your body the fuel it needs at regular intervals. So that means breakfast, that means lunch, that means dinner, and probably a small snack in between. And a lot of people are like, you're telling me to eat more? That's ridiculous, it's not gonna work. I'm not telling you to eat more at one time, not increase the size of your lunch, not increase the size of your dinner, but take all those things that you sort of binged on when you got home and spread those out throughout the course of the day. And when you're choosing those foods, making sure that you're choosing foods where you can identify really where they came from. Is it a whole type food? Whole wheat bread, brown rice, oatmeal, fruits and vegetables, proteins where you kind of know where it came from as well. So beans, fish, nuts. Combining something with protein is going to satisfy you, so you're not going to be hungry, but combining that with carbohydrates, so grains, fruits, dairy, is going to give you the energy that you need and that you're craving, but the protein piece will help keep you more stable mood-wise. For example, if you would have, and maybe this doesn't apply to all of you, but if you would have Pop-Tarts for breakfast, and you eat that Pop-Tart, you feel great for half an hour, and then you're crashing and burning, so you have the other one to pick you back up, and then you crash and burn. And so that up and down, you're irritable, you're moody, and that's sort of what's happening with your monthly cycle too, so we want to even that out. And even for our women who are, you've gone through menopause or you're in that process, having that consistent carbohydrate intake is going to regulate your blood sugar much better, because if you've had weight gain, your body is not as sensitive to moving that blood sugar into the actual cells. So consistent intake throughout the day. And dairy is something for helping in terms of mood, helping in terms of bone, both for women who are having monthly cycles and women who have gone through menopause or going through menopause. 3 servings a day, and that can be dairy foods or that can be calcium-rich foods. So, can somebody give me an example of a calcium-rich, not dairy food? Not dairy food. Broccoli, kale, strawberries, they're delicious. You can have them on your cereal. Canned salmon. Canned salmon, yes. So those are all great sources. So your kind of dark green leafy vegetables are really good. Kale, collards, bok choy. So if we're thinking about a meal where we can incorporate these things, so for breakfast, oatmeal, some nuts, make that oatmeal with milk or soy milk. Dinner, you can have a stir fry with brown rice, toss in a lot of those leafy green veggies, put some shrimp in there, some lean beef, you could do some salmon. For your snacks, doing some yogurt, and I would recommend doing either yogurt with fruit on the bottom and not stirring it completely, or doing plain and then adding fresh fruit to it, because you're getting less of that up and down. And then toss some wheat germ on there. Wheat germ is a great source of vitamin E, a great source of magnesium, and those are seen to help relieve a lot of the symptoms associated with those monthly ups and downs. So calcium, dairy, calcium-rich foods 3 times a day. B6, that's another vitamin that's going to help to regulate in terms of reducing irritability and those mood shifts. So B6 sources would be good protein sources, lean meats, fish. And then magnesium and vitamin E, and that's where you get a lot of your nuts, your wheat germ. Cooked spinach. So the examples that I've given you as we've talked, the oatmeal with the nuts, with the dairy, that's incorporating all of those particular nutrients that are going to help to even things out. So a lot of women are skeptical when I tell them, please eat more, please try to do these things, but then they come back and they're like, oh, I have so much more energy, or I'm not as moody, I'm not crashing and burning, and when I get home, I'm not starving, I have more control. So it's giving you control and helping you pair with your body to meet its needs. And if you do crave that chocolate, then go for the dark chocolate because you're going to get benefits from that as well. And that is all I have, so we're going to open it up to everybody for questions. Oh, I forgot to talk about vitamin D. So for vitamin D, have your levels checked. If you are deficient, you should correct it and discuss what that correction amount should be with your doctor. But because we live in Ohio, we really don't get a lot of vitamin D from sunlight. Now we are, but we really can't get enough necessarily from our food sources alone. So most of you are probably on the low side, so get it checked and see where you're at, and then you can correct to get into the appropriate range.
Ironically, vitamin D is not just about bone health. It also improves your energy levels. It helps with your colon health. A lot of times people feel fatigued or constipated. It's because of low vitamin D levels. So it is definitely something to have checked. And most of us go out with sunscreen. If you follow all the skin cancer recommendations and you're using sunscreen, you're going to decrease your absorption of vitamin D from the sun.
And I forgot, I'm talking about vitamin D next Tuesday, so you can come hear more.
I'm just curious. My 27-year-old daughter is probably about 15 or 16% body fat. She's an RDLD and personal trainer. She's kind of crazy. But she also finds me quite strange because I keep saying things like, so you have a period, honey? And, oh, Mom, don't be ridiculous. The doctors have ways to make that, you know, we don't have to have periods anymore. And I'm like, I have grandchildren. So what's the balance? Not right now, but you know, but what's the balance?
So one of the things that we've all touched on is that female athlete triad of oligomenorrhea or amenorrhea. And how do we prevent that, or how do we improve that? There are two different issues. If you are on birth control, if you're taking birth control pills or the NuvaRing or the patch or any of those things, it is okay not to have periods because you are getting a steady dose of estrogen, you're getting a steady dose of progesterone. So in that situation, there's no benefit to having a period. It's the person who isn't on birth control who then doesn't have periods because their body fat is too low or they're exercising extreme amounts. And one of the things, and this may be what she's alluding to, I don't know, but the fact that when we do have women who are oligomenorrheic or amenorrheic that are exercising, birth control pills will improve their bone density anywhere from 3 to 6%. So it is something that can help no matter what age you are. Even in our perimenopausal women, we'll see an improvement in bone density if they go on birth control pills. So that may be one of the ways. Now, ideally, you know, it's better if they're naturally cycling. But on the other hand, if you have somebody who's not willing to put on the body fat, who doesn't want to give up their exercise, then the trade-off is we can manage it medically with birth control pills.
And I would just add that, yes, but also if there is inadequate intake, that's still a concern in terms of meeting all the nutrient needs that someone would have.
Would there be recommendations for certain types of multivitamins? Because if we're not getting everything in our diet, what should we be looking for? I go to the store and there's so many different kinds, and they all have very different levels of things. What should we be looking for?
I just recommend, so what I recommend is just a general women's one a day to cover your bases. Make sure that you're not getting more than 100% as a starting point, and
So that would be a good starting point, and if you need to fine tune it, then meet with somebody to figure out what you need to fine tune.
So I tell people, your body doesn't know designer vitamins from generic Sam's Club vitamins. The body breaks it down, absorbs it, excretes it through the kidneys, just like whether you spend $100 a month or you spend $10 a month. So again, it's more important to get, and I'm a big proponent of get your vitamins through your food. You don't need to supplement unless you have deficiencies in your diet. And again, vitamin D is one that I probably would supplement. Omega-3 fatty acids are one that, again, we are seeing the benefits of that, and most people don't get the nutrients that have omega-3 fatty acids in them. So those would be ones to supplement. A good multivitamin, a women's multivitamin does not have 100% of your calcium requirements. So it is something that you're going to have to look at separately. No matter what multivitamin you buy, usually they're between 200 and 300 milligrams of calcium in them. Nikki was a OBGYN before she became a urogynecologist.
Is glucose a good supplement for athletes?
So I've been taking it probably, so this is a case study of one. There's some research that shows benefits. There's lots of research that says that you're just peeing it out. However, when I was trying to get pregnant, my OBGYN did say stop taking that because you're telling me it makes a difference, and so we don't know what the effects, nor are they ever going to study the effects of women who are pregnant taking glucosamine, chondroitin. But I've been taking it, having said that, I've been taking it 16 or 17 years. For me, it's how I get out of bed in the morning. So as a physical therapist, I'm pretty physical, and then I do the CrossFit on top of that. So lots of jumping and lots of wear and tear on my joints. So again, case study of one. I certainly noticed it when I stopped taking it. When I started taking it, you really have to give it some time. I think 8 to 10 weeks, really, before I saw a difference. And honestly, for the first 3 to 4 weeks, I had more joint pain. Now that could just be me. I don't know what the research says about that, but I don't think we really know is the answer.
There is some data to support using glucosamine and chondroitin for arthritis. So that may be one area that you might, if you have arthritis, if you have joint inflammation, joint pain, you may want to consider using it. But it's not something that everybody needs to supplement.
Probably this is not from an MD standpoint, but my husband's a swimming coach, so from the athletic realm, most of the athletic data comes through with glucosamine being very helpful for people who are doing a lot of powerlifting, like you said, flipping those tires, and kind of using a lot of muscular control that way.
Talk about vitamins, and I've heard that you can test the vitamin to see if your body is absorbing it, with vinegar and make sure it dissolves in 20 minutes. Is a whole food concentrate vitamin better than just a regular in terms of your body absorbing it? I hear different things.
Not sure.
Good question.
Sorry, it's a good
Yeah.
question.
Any other questions?
How is a bone density test taken? What exactly do they do?
It's very simple. Essentially what you do is you go into, there's a machine, a DEXA machine, you lay down, they take pictures of your hip and spine, 2 areas where your bone loss is going to happen earlier on than like in your wrist or your ankle or anywhere else. And they measure as, she said, they measure based on your age group, so that gives you a Z-score, and a T-score compares your bone density to a 30 to 35-year-old person. So there are 2 different scores that are obtained from doing a DEXA scan.
Is there an ideal age requirement you should consider getting a bone density scan?
So yes, it keeps changing. So it depends on if you want insurance to pay for it. So I think Medicare covers it at 65. I think they'll cover your first one. Now, if you talk to Jackie Buell, who's a researcher at Ohio State that does a lot of sports DEXA, she believes, and I agree, that everybody has the right to know what our bone health is. And so the more we know, and by the way, we're seeing an increased number of fractures in folks who are osteopenic versus osteoporosis. So it's not just, you know, folks who have a certain Z-score, but at any rate, so I had my first one done at 46. I was amenorrheic, so I had a reason to have it done. Besides that, I really just wanted to have it done. So my insurance paid for it, but you have to have a reason if you're younger than 65, I believe.
So the usual indications are going to be people who are on the medications that Lisa mentioned. If you're on long-term thyroid, you've had chemotherapy, somebody who's been on long-term anticonvulsants, if you have a history of smoking, you know, steroid use, thank you. So those are all certain criteria that will recommend, your physician should recommend that you have a bone density. We used to recommend doing a bone density within 2 years of menopause, because that's when the greatest bone loss occurs. Just like your greatest bone mass occurs, you know, in the pubertal years, the biggest bone loss happens within 2 years of menopause. But again, there's a lot of controversy on whether that's worth doing at that stage of life or not. So Medicare strictly will pay after 65. There are medical indications for getting bone densities, and as I mentioned, like bone medication use. For younger women, if they've been on Depo-Provera for 2 years or more, that's another indication for getting bone density done. And young women who've had a stress fracture.
So I have a personal experience with this. Jackie, they mentioned, was doing a study 3 years ago that was on runners, distance runners, females. They were looking at the triad. So I signed up for the study, and the DEXA scan was part of that. I was 36 at the time, and I actually found out I'm osteopenic already at that time. So I didn't have any indicators. I just signed up on my own. But looking at history and what they're talking about, I have asthma, so I'm on a corticosteroid. I've always been an exerciser. I've always had low body mass. When I was younger, my periods kind of were all over the place. So a lot of those triggers were probably there. But I'm glad that I did this study, because I have some ways to actually work on improving that. So.
It's not an expensive test. I mean, if it's something that you're interested in doing, it's not a very expensive test.
So if you find out, you've had the test done, you find out you're in the osteopenia category, what can you do? I mean, what do you do with that information?
Just throw your hands up. Interestingly enough, and Lisa and I were talking about this, it doesn't matter how old you are, you can increase your bone density just by weight training, by strength training. Some of the things she mentioned, some of the high impact stuff. And I have women tell me all the time, oh, I bike and I do the elliptical. It's not going to cut it. You can't. Swimming, unfortunately, doesn't help. You know, it's that high impact, that sort of pounding movement or lifting. You know, not just little 2 to 5 pound weights, but seriously lifting. Those are things that will improve your bone density. Diet changes. If you drink a lot of caffeine, cut that out. If you drink pop or soda, cut that out. Carbonated beverages. You know, you get more of the calcium and stuff in your diet. And those are things that you can do if you're osteopenic to improve your bone density.
What supplement's more important for bone density, is it calcium or is it vitamin D? Because I had one doctor increase my calcium to astronomical levels, and then the other one said, no, you don't need all that calcium, and
that's exactly what's happened in the last couple of years. It's literally gone from calcium's important to vitamin D is more important. So
vitamin D helps you absorb the calcium, and you have to have the calcium for the bone. So, and you have to put in the calcium so it's available to your bones. If you're not putting it in, your body needs calcium in the blood. It's going to pull it out of the bones to keep that blood level where it needs to be. So you have to put it in on a consistent basis, or you're going to reduce your mass as well.
And jump. 5 times a day.
All right.
What Zumba do you think?
Listen, physical therapists love Zumba. We love it for 2 reasons. You get those multi-planar jumping motions, and then you get to come see me because you get tendonitis. I should have opened one of them. I'm teasing, so you have to be careful. You have to start slow and ramp up. But in terms, for me, if you're asking me about bone health, I love it. I love aerobics, I love step aerobics, I love anything that causes your feet to leave the floor, I think is great. That's a very general, now don't go home and jump off, your couch, break a hip, and then you come see me. But I'm just saying, just generally, if we can just start jumping. I am. Here's my card.
So during perimenopause and menopause, hot flashes, insomnia, typical. What do you do about it as an athlete? You're training for a race, you're not getting enough sleep, you're waking up at 2 a.m., dripping, you can't go back to sleep.
So the things that we talked about in terms of consistent intake throughout the day, caffeine and alcohol, spicy foods, like avoiding those. Those are some of like the initial things that I would suggest.
You already do that.
And you already do that?
Go see your gynecologist. So in the perimenopausal years, we use, again, I do not have stock in birth control, by the way, but birth control pills are very effective at managing some of those perimenopausal symptoms. They do help with hot flashes and night sweats. Yoga breathing, that sort of deep rhythmic breathing will help. Keeping a pitcher of ice water bedside, drinking a little ice water, help. Yeah, throw it over here.
I had the doors open in the winter, my husband
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. But realistically, if you are to the point where none of the conservative things, and some people use melatonin to help with sleep. If you're taking melatonin, you don't take it right before you go to bed. You actually take it 4 to 6 hours before you go to bed. It's going to help you more. So make sure you're taking that at the right time. So it's not, you're laying there going, I can't fall asleep, and then all of a sudden, when you should be at work, you're falling asleep. And then, again, exercise helps with perimenopausal symptoms. But I would say, medically speaking, we can do low doses of estrogen, we can do birth control pills, we can do the NuvaRing or the patch to help.
Well, if you have any other questions, Dr. Somani and company will hang around. Thank you all so very much for coming. We want to make one other really quick announcement that we're pretty excited. Definitely Amy and I know Dawn and actually Anita and some of the other ladies will be coming back. We have a series of talks, roughly every 3 Tuesdays out of every month. We'll be covering the whole gamut of everything you need to know about running and walking and how it affects your health. We're going to be announcing that actually probably Monday, next Monday. So stay tuned for that. They're going to be tied to all of the various shoe vendors, apparel vendors, so there'll be some fun swag if you show up. And then they're all going to be followed by a fun run and walk as well. So we're going to have some education, we'll have a little workout, and then we'll also have a avenue for a social gathering following those. So again, thank you for coming. These lovely young ladies did a fantastic job, so thank you.